Well, hello. All right, so I'm just gonna kind of wait. Welcome everybody to the Gaited horse course free Q&A that I'm doing today. I'm Jenny Trainor, and I'll be your host today as we go through this. So as everybody kind of pops on here, I figured one of the things that I might do is I might give you guys a little quick taste of what my 6-month Gaited horse course actually looks like. Kind of get the ideas and the ball rolling, because that's kind of a fun way to go. I'm going to have you guys all stay muted. I might help with that really quick. And look at guys over here. And so what I'm going to do is I'll have you guys all muted, and then as we go through, I'll have you raise your hand, and you can do that by going down into the keyboard on the bottom, and if you you can ask to raise your hand down there, or you can just pop up and hopefully I'll see you, but if there's a whole bunch of you, so I may not see you all waving your hands. So if you actually ask to raise your hand, then it'll put you on the thing, and I can go through and actually answer your questions individually as we go through. But this call is in preparation for my my Gaited horse course that I do. I do it 2 times a year. And so I'm going to share my screen really quick and just kind of go through that, or what it looks like in my actual course. Okay. So share. So you guys should be able to see my screen. Can you guys nod if you can see my screen, a couple of you? Yes, maybe. Cool. All right. So this is I'm going to make this smaller so that I can get to the thing over here. So this is my actual Gaited horse course. And what happens in here is I have what's called guides. So the first guide is kind of boring. It's gives me some more information about you guys. You get to take a little quiz on where your horses are at now, obviously, like releases and those sorts of things. Then number 2, we talk about the gait scale and what end of the gait scale your horse is on. So whether or not your horse is on the pacey end of the gait scale or the trotty end of the gait scale, or maybe lives a little bit in both, and why that helps us to know where our horse is, rather than trying to name what gait it is that they're currently doing, because most of the time they're not doing a gait that is very good, and they're switching between gaits very quickly. So it makes it very difficult for us to identify what gait it is, especially when they're switching back and forth so often. So it's more beneficial for me to figure out which end of the scale your horse is on, and then therefore where do we need to go in order to improve their gait. Okay. So there's a fun little video in there that shows a camel, which is obviously pacing, and a trotting horse, which is obviously trotting. So you see both ends of the scale doing a dressage test. Then there's a paper on the gatekeeper gene. And then in guide number 3, we do a tour of common gaits and then gait modification from the ground. So we watch videos of horses that I see in most of my clinics, and what gait they're kind of doing, what end of the scale they're on. And we watch some miscellaneous other fun videos. We talk about how horses learn, what your homework is, and then how to modify your horse's gait from the ground. Okay. Because that's the most important. If you can fix their gait from the ground where you can see it, then you can fix their gait when riding. So that's the most important part, is how do we do that from the ground? Yes, it's important to do it when riding, but the fun thing is that everything we do from the ground will transfer to riding. Okay. So then we talk about fluidity, which is basically how should we ride the gaits? How is it most beneficial so that our horse understands what it is that we want them to do? Because if we just go into the gait that they're going into, then sometimes that doesn't help, because we just follow them. We're supposed to be the leader, so we should designate which gait it is that we want to go into. But if they go into pace and we go, okay, fine, I'm going to go into a 2-beat lateral maneuver with you too, they think, oh, that's great, we're doing the same thing. So we want to make sure that we know how to ride each gait and how we can help them with each of their gaits. Then there's a little bit on rein preparation. for modifying gaits later on. Then we go into guide number 5, which is using one rein to modify your gait. And then we have a QnA, and lifting one rein in advance will advance as we go along so that it doesn't always look like our neighbors can see what we're doing. Okay. Then in guide number 6, we talk about biomechanics and lateral maneuvers. And this is a really big module because it has lots of things to talk about in there. So we do, in all of these, we do a lot of lecture because it helps us to understand. Then we do some bit isolations to teach our horses how to put their head down and relax when we pick up the rein so their head doesn't go jetting straight into the air. Then we talk about what our leg positions actually do and how we use them. And then we do teaching leg positions from the ground, and then getting organized with our reins from the ground or as a simulation. And then we talk about how we turn like a boat and how we use leg yields to help with our modifications. Okay, then in guide number 7, this is one of my personal horses. And so I have basically my first 8 rides in here, and you get to see what happens on him, because a lot of times when you get a new horse, you have to figure out how to get him to gait. And this horse didn't gait worth a darn when I got him. So you got to see the changes happen through him. And then this is guide number 8, has the first Q&A, the sessions from the first time that I did this Q&A or did this course back in 2020. And so you guys get all of those as well. Plus you're going to get your own Q&As through the 6-month course. So then there's bonus materials. And so this has a whole bunch of things, anything that comes up that somebody wants a little video for or extra information for, I will put this in here, and I do all sorts of things. Obviously, how to catch your horse, circling game, attaching the stirrups to a particular saddle, goal boards, figure 8s online, teaching your horse to stand still at the mounting block. That's a big deal. So I did a video on how to do that because it's really important. Tying the lead rope into reins if you wanted to do that. Hill therapy is really important, or even the beep beep game. This is super important because this is one of those things that we need for trail riding hugely. And so not that it's necessarily gaited related, but it was really important. So I plopped that into the course as well. Okay. So now I'm going to stop sharing and come back to you guys. I just wanted you guys to kind of get a little feel of what is in the course. And then today, what we're doing today is kind of that same idea of a feel of what's in the course, because this is the Q&A session. So basically now it's up to you guys to go ahead and ask questions. And so I have one question that was already sent in, and I don't know if she's here. Let's see here. Marie. Yep, and Marie looks like she's here. So yay. Okay, so Marie sends me this question. And Marie, you can go ahead and unmute yourself if you want to. And she said, my question is that my horse has a beautiful gait, but unless she is really relaxed, she prefers to pace. When he actually is gaiting and I ask for a bit faster, he almost always changes to a pace. He's a tense right brain introvert. We have a really good connection, but okay. So here's what happens a lot of the times is that when we ask for a little bit more speed, sometimes our horse isn't necessarily ready, or we may not ask them in a way that's palatable for them, or they may not be able to carry anything any faster than that. So Marie is actually going to come to a clinic in Spokane in, I think, like 3 weeks. So we're going to get to work with her horse in person. But the important thing is that when we get to pace in our horses, most of the time it's because our horses have braced through their top line. Okay. And so if our horse is bracing in their top line, then what we need to do is we need to help them not brace. And so that's where one rein is really important. A lot of times what happens is when people hit into a pace, the standard theory of how do you fix that is collection. Well, that's not necessarily the best idea. The best idea is to take the tension out of our horses. And so the way that we can do that is with one rein, and being able to use one rein and one leg and put a little bend in our horse's body so that they begin to relax. Now, The problem with that is that most of the time what happens is our horses do slow down, but we have to teach them that when we put our leg on, it means relax. And so most of the time what happens with our horses is that when you put one leg on gaited horses, they tend to go faster forward, which is not the response that we should have. The response that we should have when we place one leg on our horse is that our horse goes, oh, I'm supposed to yield to that one leg and relax into it. And so that's the important part, is teaching them how to do that. Now, the fact that she has a decent gait at some points in time, or he has a decent gait at some points in time, is that at that point, at that speed, he can go ahead and have a good gait. He says, okay, I'm relaxed, everything is going well. Then all of a sudden, you know, the saber-toothed butterfly jumps out of the woods and he gets tense and we get a pace. Or you've asked him to go faster and he's like, I'm not sure how to organize my body. And so one of the things that I think about for, like, say, the running walk or a faster gait is that it's like an extended trot. So in the dressage world, extended trot is an advanced maneuver. So their horses have to have the ability to have good carrying power on their hindquarters so that they can extend that trot. So that's the same thing with our running walk or going faster in our gait, is that our horses have to have good carrying power on their hindquarters. And if they don't have good carrying power, then it becomes really difficult for them to go ahead and go faster. So we have to teach them how to do that and how to be strong in that. Plus, when we ask them to go faster, how do we do that? Are we just jamming both legs on and having them go faster, or can we change our fluidity a little bit? That's that word that I used earlier in one of those modules. And fluidity is all about how we ride in our body and what we do in our body. And so can we maintain and have a 4-beat gait? Because realistically, if we want our horses to pace, we need to have a 2-beat gait in our body, because a pace is a 2-beat gait. If we want our horses to walk or do something that is smooth, things that are smooth tend to be a 4-beat gait. Okay, so that means that we have to continue to have fluidity through our body and keep that beat going and not get stiff and rigid. Because if we get stiff and rigid in our body, then our horses are going to get stiff and rigid in their body. So that's where fluidity comes in to be really, really handy, and how we have to help them learn how to be softer in their body. Okay, so Marie, does that help you a little bit?
Yes, very much. Thank you.
Very cool. All right. And I look forward to seeing you in Spokane, not too far off.
Me too.
Very cool. All right. So looks like Bethany has a question. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to lower your hand and I'll go ahead and get your question. So Bethany, where are you at?
Hi, I'm in Cincinnati, Ohio. And my question is, I am struggling with, when trail riding, either my gaited horse or my trotting horse, is when we get to a ditch or a valley hill, loves to fly down, fly back up. And I feel like I'm in her mouth too much. And then she starts getting all sassy on me. So walk me through kind of what I should be doing, because I don't think I'm doing it correctly.
Gotcha. Okay. So a lot of times what happens is that our horses get really off balance when they're going downhill or uphill, right? The uphill doesn't seem to be such a problem for our gaited horses. They can do that. But what happens is they fall on the forehand going downhill. So the best thing is to prep them, maybe not necessarily on that hill, but you're going to prep them on a flat piece of ground to start with, right? So number one, how's your backup? How does your horse back up?
Really, really well.
Okay, super. So you can back up pretty well, right? So now what we need to do is we need to think about, can you back her up without using very much rein?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So now what you go is you find yourself a little hill, maybe not out on the trail ride, because what happens on trail rides is that our horses get amped up, right? And they get excited because they're going in a new place. The environment is changing. You have new buddies that are hanging out in there. But what we want to do is we want to go ahead and say, just a slight incline to begin with, can you stop on that hill and can you back up the hill? Okay. And so what happens is that you want to practice that. And so you're going to practice that at home somewhere where there's not a lot of craziness going on. Can I back you up? And can you sit down? So anytime you start to feel your horse falling forward and speeding up, going down that hill, you're going to be like, no, we're going to stop and we're going to back up the hill. Okay. Does that make sense?
It
So you're-
does.
And so you're going to play with that on ever increasing hills. So, you know, it's just a little bit flat. And you can even, if you're having trouble with this, you can do it from the ground. You don't have to actually be riding, but helping them to understand how to balance themselves because they're just falling downhill, right? So you can take your own weight off of the situation and back them up a hill from either in front of them or beside them or however you want to do it. We call it yo-yo game in Pirelli land. I don't know if you have any natural horsemanship background.
I do.
Okay, perfect. So like yo-yo game backwards up a hill is a great one for them to go ahead and go, oh, so that you could stop them at any point and back them up that hill, right? And so that's going to start to really get your balance going so that your horse is starting to understand that. And then you'll practice it. And so you'll practice it on a loose rein, preferably, right? And so anytime you feel that horse start to fall forward, you say, nope, we're going to back up. And you give them the benefit of the doubt to allow them to go down there. But as soon as they start to fall forward, you stop and you back up that hill again. Okay. And so that will really help you. The other thing too, is that you don't want to lean too far back when you're going downhill.
Mhm.
You want to stay as if you were, you know, parallel to the trees. So if there was a tree on that hill, that you're at the same angle as that tree, and you don't want to push or brace in your stirrups when you go downhill either. You want to sit on your butt, but not lean back. And so that being, because if you push down on your stirrups really far, then you put the weight on the front end and you're helping them run down the hill. Does that make sense?
It
So
absolutely does.
So we need to sit on our balance point, which is that place in between where your seat bones are and your tailbone lies, because you don't want to be as far back as you can possibly go, but you want to have a nice rounded back. So see if you guys can see me. I don't want to have a hollow back. I want to have a rounded back. Okay. So I want to sit there, but I still want to have a place where I can drop back a little bit further because that's my stop button. But I don't want to be sitting up on my seat bones and have that hollow back because that slams weight onto the front end of my horse, which is what your problem is going downhill anyway, right? So once you get the downhill stuff, the uphill stuff is really not that much more difficult. But again, you want to be sitting on your balance point. And again, going uphill, you want to be parallel to the trees. You don't necessarily want to be leaning forward because again, you're putting that weight on the forehand. And so now it's hard for them to get their front end up to lift up the hill. And again, part of that is balance, that they end up rushing up the hill because they're not able to carry the weight on their hindquarters. And that's the same thing that we're teaching them going down the hill, is to carry weight on their hindquarters. It's the same thing as teaching them to be able to gait faster, is teaching them to carry weight on their hindquarters, because their butt is their strongest point. That's where the motor is, where the engine is. We have to teach the engine to do its job and work. If they're doing everything with the front end, then they're not going to be able to be as athletic or have as good a gait or be as powerful. Does that help a little bit?
It does. So, because I was taught when you go down, and I was taught by, folks in Pirelli, is kind of like to tighten up on your reins. And if she moves forward and into the rein, that's on her, not me. But it just really irritates her. And I feel like it's just not right. So
Exactly. And you should be able to do it like for me, I'm not necessarily going to hold on those reins. Like my horses, when I trail ride, I have a great big droopy rein. Like it's super droopy. And if they're going to do something silly, then I'm going to pick up my reins. But for the most part, it's easy for me to go ahead and slide down and get to my reins if I need to. Like I'll ride with a California roll or something of that nature so that I can get down to my reins. But they have the opportunity, but it's their job to stay emotionally balanced so that they stay back on their own body and listen to my seat. So they're going to run into the pressure for me too, but they get the opportunity to have that loose rein first. And then I'm going to draw up on my reins and I'm going to say, oh, no. You lost your ability to be on that loose rein once you started to rush down that hill. And that's when I'm going to go ahead and gather up and I'm going to come to a stop and I'm going to back up. And that's their, for lack of a better term, that's their consequence for rushing down a hill, is that they get to back up the hill. So horses learn what happens before what happens, as long as we have a sequence of what happens. But if you're already holding onto the reins tight, there's no consequence. She's already got the bad consequence, right?
Yeah.
And so there's no reason for her to get off of that rein or to know what is it that my human up there wants me to do. And so that's where you give them that opportunity, is that you say, oh, would you look at that? I am so sorry, Sally, Joe, Mary, you ran down the hill. That means I'm going to pick up my reins, shorten them up, and we're going to come to a stop, and I'm going to back you back up the hill, which is really hard work. They don't like doing it. And so if go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. You had a question. So let's.
Yep. So similar in that she will, and I think it's obviously me, we're trail riding, we're in a single line. If the horse in front of her is not moving, she will like bite his butt, which can create, as you know, craziness. So is it the similar thing, like loose rein, up, slide down, stop, back her up?
Yes,
and the
you can
beep
use
game too.
Beep beep game is the best way to go.
Yeah.
And so that's where, for those of you that haven't ever heard of the beep beep game, basically what happens is it's the horse in front of you, teaching your horse that the horse in front of you has a personal space and that they need to respect that space. And so that's where, the friend in front of you, you just say, hey, could I use a little help? And then they take either a string, the tassels that are on their saddle, the end of their rein, they wave their arm. I a lot of times will carry a carrot stick, and I'm going to swing it behind me. And my job is to defend my own horse's butt, so that Bethany's horse doesn't bite my horse on the butt. And so I'm happily aiming at that horse's nose with my stick, my hand, whatever. And I may not actually be able to touch them, but if I can, I certainly am going to. And so that is me kicking Bethany's horse rather than my horse kicking Bethany's horse, which is much more detrimental if my horse decides to unload on her horse, right? But if I unload on her horse, I'm not going to necessarily do damage. Does that make sense? I'm just going to defend my space. So that's the beginnings of that. And like my personal horse should know better than to kick other horses, right? When I'm riding him, doesn't mean that he does, or doesn't mean that all of your horses do, but he should know better that that's not an appropriate response. But I still need to teach Bethany's horse how to stay back. So that's where that beep beep comes into. And again, that's backing up. So one of the things that I can do is I could back my horse up and continue to back Bethany's horse up, so long as her horse's nose is still pointed at my horse's butt. If her horse veers off to the side, then if my horse were to kick, he could kick Bethany, and we don't need that. So that's why her nose needs to stay. She needs to keep her horse directly on the horse's butt in front of her. Does that make sense, Bethany?
It sure does.
Super. All right. Well, hopefully that helps a little bit. And
It
same
does.
thing, once you get it, like the downhill and the uphill going reasonably on your own, then add in another horse and play beep beep game with it. And so hopefully another horse that knows how to go slow downhill and go slow uphill, so that they start to monitor your horse's speed well, or you just keep playing that beep beep game with them. Does that make sense?
Sure does. Thank you.
Super. You're welcome. Okay, I saw something pop up in the chat. And let's see here. This is WK, which it doesn't tell me who that is exactly. I'm looking at a Missouri Foxtrotter, age 6, that has only been riding in a hackamore. In researching Google, it looks like the only difference in the cues is not having steady pressure, but using a bumping. Is that correct? Okay, well, it depends. Who is WK? Wendy Kearns. Oh, okay. So Wendy, is it a mechanical hackamore, or is it a rope hackamore, or is it a bozal? A bozal. I'm reading lips. Okay, so y'all didn't know. she can unmute herself. So the deal here, and so those of you that study natural horsemanship and ride in a halter, right? The halter is basically a hackamore. So in the vaquero / Hispanic terms, hakima is the word for halter, and that's where hackamore comes as well. Okay, so the idea is that a hackamore in those terms should be something that does not have any metal in it. So that's where A mechanical hackamore is not really that same thing, but a mechanical hackamore has a lot of device to it and a lot of leverage. Whereas like a rope halter doesn't have a lot of leverage to it. It's very soft. Whereas a bozal has a little bit of leverage, but again, it's very soft. You're not going to be able to put the pressure on it that you put on a mechanical hackamore. Okay. So I ride most everything I ride will get to go into a halter at some point. When I bring them home from Middle Tennessee and they've had a great big huge long shank on them, I don't go straight into a halter because most of the time I will die. And so I have to transition back down into something that is a little bit less. So the nice thing about having something that's already in a bozal is it's very light. But yes, you're going to want to ride on a loose rein. So if you ride a halter or a bozal, or even your bridle on a concentrated rein, which means that there's connection between your horse's mouth and your hands, then what you're doing essentially is you're riding your brakes. So, and you're going to eventually ride your brake pads down to nothing if you don't let them go. So it's the idea is that we want to ride on that loose rein, and we'll pick up the reins when we need them to apply the brakes or apply some communication. But if you continue, when you're going down a big steep hill with a great big trailer behind you, if you continue to ride those brakes, someday you will never not have brakes. And so the idea is not necessarily, yes, you can use bumping, but that's something that is done in a little bit more finesse. So in Pirelli, one of the things that we talk about in natural horsemanship is we talk about riding on a loose rein or freestyle. And we want to do that 80% of the time. 20% of the time we can pick up those reins and we can use that in connection and collection. Okay. But we want to have that loose rein. And so that the idea there is that you don't ruin your brake pads, right? And so you want to be able to always have your brakes. Now, like when I use my brakes most of the time on my horse, that's when I round my back and I sit back and I breathe out. My horse goes, oh, that means stop. Now, if he doesn't stop, then I'm going to pick up my reins and I'm going to say, hey, you weren't listening, and pick up my reins and ask him to stop. So the deal there is, because Wendy actually got to join me for a clinic on a horse, and you were riding in basically, that horse that you rode was in a side pull. Okay. So basically the same thing. If you ride your brakes on that, you will wear them out. Okay. The thing that happens is that when you're riding in something like a bozal, a hackamore, a side pull, something like that, it's really easy to wear the brake pad out when it's on top of the nose. When you're in the mouth, it's a little bit more difficult to wear the brake pad out. Does not mean that it cannot happen, because it does happen, but you have a lot more force in the mouth. The nose will dull much quicker than the mouth will dull. Okay. And we have these things called bigger bits, and that's what people go to is bigger and bigger bits. And we don't want to necessarily do that. So that's why we ride on a loose rein, is so that we can do that. And in order to do that, then we have to have other communication besides just our hands, right? And as gaited horse riders, and I can say this because I was this way for a very long time, and I'm still working and will continuously always be working on correcting this, is that we have no idea that our legs exist or the rest of our body. And so once I figured that out, life became much easier. It's way easier to ride our horses if we use our whole body rather than just our hands. Okay. If we use just our hands, then we're using what natural horsemanship people call phase 4. Okay. So we have 4 phases. We have suggest, ask, tell, and promise. And so one of the things that we think about is that when we think about those 4 phases, we can also think of them as eyes, belly button, legs, rein. So rein is phase 4. That's tell or make happen, right? That's or promise that it's going to happen. So that's our 4th phase. But if you're already at phase 4, then you're not using any of the things that you have beforehand that you could potentially utilize, right? So that's the importance of that. And one of the reasons why I made this course up was to help people start to learn about the rest of their body and what to do with that, so that we can move forward and get more out of our horses without wearing our brake pads down and without only relying on our hands. Okay. Does that help, Wendy?
Yes, thank you.
Awesome. Okay, now there's a couple other little things that popped up in this chat, so I'm going to have to go back and look at them because they whizzed by faster than I could see them. Oh, okay. What is the best way to teach a horse to pony? Okay, so number one has to have a horse that you can pony off of reasonably. Number two is the horse that you're teaching to pony, does he know how to lead well? And can they, when you're leading them, can they go faster with you just adding a little bit of pressure on your lead rope, right? So that's one of the best ways that I find, is that if they don't lead well off of the lead rope, they're not going to lead well from another horse. So then the other thing is that usually I want those horses to be friendly. And so they should probably live together, or have lived together, or have spent some time together, so that they've worked out all of their miscellaneous who is the leader of who. Okay. Then the other thing that happens that's really important, especially like if you're playing with, like, say, a baby that is let's say a little bit on the obnoxious side, because that happens a lot, is that your driving game works really well. And so can I get that horse back by using a driving game of like a stick, or can I play yo-yo game and can I wiggle my lead rope and have that horse back up off of my pressure? Because when I'm sitting on the horse that I'm riding on, if I have an obnoxious baby, there's a good chance that he's going to want to jump on my saddle horse. And that's not so helpful. So I need to be able to have him get back and get away from me, and me to be able to defend my horse's personal space. So again, that's kind of like that beep beep game, which means that the horse that I'm riding on has to be okay with things like stick and ropes and whatever. So he has to be good at ponying something. So that's typically what I do, but I need to, like, if I'm walking and I'm leading my horse, if I go into a run, I need my horse to come with me. And if he doesn't come with me, then I'm going to take my stick and string and I'm going to add a little energy behind him to help him go with me. But I'm going to do that on my own 2 feet before I hop up on my horse, so that he understands how to come off the pressure of the lead rope. Okay. So that looks like it's Bill and Ella. Where is Bill and Ella? Does that help you a little bit? No.
Yeah, it does. But I have a kind of another question on that. So you know Whiskey, you've seen Whiskey. He's the dominant in our herd. And then my mare, we want to go on a backcountry trip in August. So we are going to be all kind of together, and we're going to pony Bill's other horse, who is a quarter horse. Whiskey doesn't let Gunner buy him. So how is it possible, if you have a horse as a pasture mate that doesn't allow him in the space, how do you pony? Because Gunner ponies, we ponied him, but how do you get it so that Whiskey, who is the dominant horse in the herd, will allow Gunner to be ponied behind him? Is there a possibility?
Okay, which one are you riding? The dominant is.
Yeah, Bill will be riding Whiskey.
Okay, and then.
And he'll be ponying Gunner.
And which one's the dominant horse?
Whiskey.
Whiskey. Okay, so here's the deal, is that Bill has to be the leader. Okay. And so that's the trouble, is that and both horses have to trust that. And so that's where he's the one that has to be able to say, hey, swing your hindquarters away and keep control of Whiskey, so that because the deal for Gunner is that Gunner is thinking about his own personal, whether or not he could be near that horse. So that's a friendly game malfunction. And that's where you're going to have to play with that. Now, so does Gunner pony off of other horses, or can you pony Gunner from a different horse? Does he know how to do that?
I have ponied Gavina when I've ridden Gunner. So he has allowed another horse to be ponied from him.
So does Gunner know how to be ponied from a horse in general, not to mention the horse that he doesn't get along with?
I don't know if I've ever ponied Gunner.
Okay, so
most likely he does.
Okay, so, but the big thing there is that's one of those things that you're going to have to play with. So here, like in this particular case, he potentially he knows how to pony, but the problem is that the two horses don't like each other.
Right. They don't.
Okay. So here is where you get to use your groundwork to help you with this. Okay. And so this is where you can play with them, and you can go, okay, I'm going to play circling game with both horses. So you both are out there and each one of you has Gunner and one of you has Whiskey. and you're
Okay.
both out there and you're playing, say, circling game or sideways game, and you're doing like a lot of energy so that they're working fairly hard. And then when you come to a stop, you stop them together and side by side. So
Oh,
they get to
okay.
rest. Now,
Yeah.
when one of them turns into being a not very nice pony, starts to tell
Spooky
the
cat.
other horse to get out of his space, that horse gets to work. Does that make sense?
Oh, yes,
So
it
this is
does.
the
Okay.
this is the exact opposite of separation anxiety, because these two want to be apart, right? So now we
Uh-huh.
want to help them learn to be together. So all we're going to do is when they start to be, it's just like your kids, when they start to turn into little rascals and they're one of them is beating up the other one, you're going to make that one go pick up rocks. The one that's being bad gets to go pick up rocks until he doesn't want to pick up rocks anymore, and he can stand next to his sister and not beat her up, right?
Right. Yeah.
So
Okay.
that's kind of the theory that you're going to play with, is you're going to work until he's like, man, I don't really like this working. And you're like, good. Would you like to stick next to Gunner and not be an a-hole?
That's a great idea. Okay, cool. We could
Okay.
do that. Yes.
And you can do all sorts of things. It could be sideways, it could be whatever. And then you guys could both even ride them. Okay. So one of you is on each horse. And I know that
Okay.
means somebody's going to be bouncing. Sorry about the quarter horse rider. And
Yeah.
you're going to go ahead. And the cute little quarter horse is going to get to stand still when he's being good. And as soon as Whiskey turns into an a-hole,
Spooky cat.
you're going to go ahead and do circles and figure eights and circles and figure eights and circles and figure eights and circles and figure eights until he goes, I'm kind of tired. And then you're going to go, great. Why don't you come stand right next to Gunner and be a good boy? And as soon as he starts to make ugly faces at Gunner, then you put him back to work.
Okay, that's perfect. That'll work. Yeah, cool.
Perfect.
By the way, they're going to Heather's May 2nd. Both of them, Gavina
Super.
and yeah, she's going to work on their gates and do some training for us. So thank you so much for referring us to her.
Super. You're welcome. Awesome. Love Heather. Okay, cool. Let's see here. What is next on my list here? Kelly Watts says, hi, I have a 4-year-old mare that I show. Okay, go down cursor. She has tons of nervous energy, chewing the bit drives me crazy. I hate that too. She also does not like to yield to my right leg. She is stiff on that side, but is very willing to flex to both sides. What exercises can I do? And is there a bit you recommend? Okay. So she has tons of nervous energy. So that's where we have to start with, is how do we start to relax her? So who was this? This was Kelly Watts. Kelly Watts, are you here? Let's find you. There you are. Unmute yourself, Kelly. Maybe. Let's see if I can. There you are. Okay.
Okay.
Do you tell me a little bit about your background? Are you a natural horsemanship-y person? What's your background with horses?
Sort of, kind of, not 100%. I've always shown, but I started out showing padded horses, and then for the last, I would say 7 years, I've went to pleasure horses,
Okay,
showing
perfect.
them.
Okay, so one of the biggest things that we can do, our groundwork is super important, but without
Mhm.
going into like the whole natural horsemanship program, one of the
Mhm.
best things that we can do is bending our horses, and things like small figure eights are really good. Okay. And so from the ground, you can do them on the ground as well, because a lot of times those horses still have energy on the ground. So teaching them how to do that is really important. If you guys go on my personal or on my business Facebook page and you scroll down a bit, or you look in the videos, there's a video of me playing with a horse doing figure eights. It's a quarter horse, but no matter, same sort of thing. And so that horse, we were playing with her dirty looks because she gives all sorts of dirty looks, but you can do the same sort of a figure eight, and that figure eight can help our horses to relax down. So and it's important that we don't necessarily move our feet very much. But the trouble with like lunging our horses in circles is that they just get more and more amped up, and
Right.
there's no change or no brain thinking that happens. So a figure eight is a change of direction, and that change of direction is really important because the change of direction starts to get the brain to engage. And that's what we need to do, is we need to get our brain to engage. And so as soon as she starts to relax down, then you can stop her or let her come to a stop and let her relax. And then you can ask her to go ahead and do a figure eight again if she starts to get amped up again. So same thing when you're riding, those figure eights are super duper helpful. Okay. And so we want to bring that energy down. And so having figure eights is important for that. And the idea is that you're not going to try and slow her down. You're just going to ride a small enough figure eight that she's not running away. Does that make sense?
It does.
And so we just keep them going in those little figure eights. And eventually what happens is they will start to go, and they'll
Take
relax.
that deep breath.
Yeah, take that deep breath and start to lick and chew and start to think about it. And so what we need our horses to do is we need our horses to come down off of the adrenaline and have that dopamine kick in. Okay. And so that's one of the biggest things, but it will come back up again. And then you're going to go back on that idea of that figure eight. And the idea is that you're going to ride it for long enough that they start to go, oh my goodness, I could relax a little bit. So, and like in those cases, a lot of times what I will do is, if I feel safe enough, I'll take them out of a bridle and I'll go back to the halter. Now, depending on what you're riding her in, you may not feel like you have any breaks with that. So for one of the things that I use a lot of, I'm looking around to see if I have a picture of it, is I use what's called the cradle bridle when I need to bring a horse back into relaxing and heading them down. Because I talked earlier about taking horses that are used to having a nice big long shank, you know, or horses that were maybe started padded, and then bringing them to put them into a halter. And so I kind of do a reverse. How do I get them into a smaller bit? And the cradle bridle is, hang on just a second. You guys are gonna see more of me than you want to see, because I'm gonna see if I have the picture of it. I have bridal wisdom up here at hand. Oh yeah, okay, hang on. I'll show you what it looks like real quick. Give me just a second to find it. Maybe. Okay. So this, let's see if you can see what this looks like. Okay, so I'm gonna hold this up. Let me find my little picture of me because I don't get to see me. Okay, so this is called a cradle bridle. Okay, and what happens here is it has a nose piece that acts very much like if you're going to use a halter, a bozal, a hackamore, those sorts of things. It does have kind of a curb strap. And so what happens is that this bit can be used so that you can see that maybe you can see that. Let's go here. I'm going to turn it to this side. So see how there's two different rings. There's a little ring and there's a big ring. The little ring acts like a little bit of a curb. The big ring acts more like a snaffle. Okay. So you can have lots of different versions. Sorry. Thing that I dropped. You can have lots of different versions of how to talk to your horse. But the deal is it's called the cradle because it cradles the whole head and talks to the whole head. So it talks to the nose, it talks to the bars of the teeth, the bars of the mouth and the tongue. It talks underneath to the jaw, or underneath like a curb chain or a strap would, and then to the pole as well. So you basically, it's like cradling the head so that you can put the head in all sorts of different positions. So that's one of the bits that I like to use as a backwards bit to take them from something bigger into something smaller, because a lot of times if we put something in the mouth, we just exacerbate the nervousness. Okay. And so, but ideally it's not the bit that's causing the nervousness, it's up here that the problem is, where the problem
she's
is.
like a little kid that has ADHD. That's exactly what she's like.
And so the biggest thing for her is that you have to put her on tasks and ask her to do things so that you keep her mind going and keep her mind focusing on things, but that you do things that she understands what the answer is. Because if she doesn't understand what the answer is, it makes her more and more nervous, right? So we have to help her learn how to process and how to think so that she goes, oh, there is a bridge. I'm going to go stand on the bridge because that's what I'm supposed to do. But I can only do it for so long. And then you're going to be like, and now we're going to go walk around and we're going to go across the bridge this way. And then we're going to go over those poles. And then we're going to go, you know, do something over here. But you're going to change it up to things that she's learned and preferably learned from the ground so that she knows what the answer is. And that's the important thing. And that's where understanding how to ride on a loose rein is really important, because you can pick up the reins and you can say, hey, no, wrong answer. And you can put them back down. And she goes, oh, but if we're constantly giving them information in the mouth, then what happens is it makes them more and more nervous, because we're like, don't go that way, don't go this way. Oh, you're and so there's this G and ha that happens with their face. It makes them more and more nervous because there's never any quiet. And so that's why loose reins are really important, because then that becomes quiet, right? And they have, we want to teach them to look for the quiet in life, because that's really what they want. They want peace. But if there's constantly things happening, then there's too much information going in and out. So it's just like that ADHD kid, is that you need to help them learn to focus. But if there's constantly TV and this and that and all these things happening, then they're jetting off looking at all those things. But we need to have it be so that they can find that place of quiet, that they start to seek that place of quiet. Does that
And
help?
like, it does. And like, I ride her in, I've tried the miler, just a regular little ring snaffle miler, and she really didn't like it, but I liked it because I could pick up on one side, and that, you know, that one side moves. But it was like she hated it, and I felt like I had no control whatsoever. So I put her in a copper, it's a large twisted wire, and she does fair with it. And she'll walk all day long in serpentines and figure eights. But then when I ask her to go like at a flat walk, she'll go to the left very easily. But then when I start to flat walk in that figure eight going to the right, and then I use my right leg on her, well, her neck, she won't tip her nose. She just stiffens up, and it's like she just gets all mad, a nice
Gotcha.
word. And I don't know how to correct that, you know. And when I'm going to the right, I'm using my right leg, and then I'm using my left rein kind of as that brake, kind of, and then to keep her balance. But she'll still rather to straighten up instead of staying right here. But as soon as I can get her to go right here and take a few steps, you know, I back off of her. But
Yeah.
she does not like that right leg on her. And
So
I've
it
been
could-
working probably about 3 weeks on it, and she might be just a touch better, but not a lot.
Okay, so here's where we go and we go, okay, is it physical? Because a lot of times it can be physical. And so one of the things that I think about is I like to watch my horses go, like if I'm lunging them or if they're going in a circle around me, and I'm going to keep an eye on their tail. Okay. And so if their tail, hang on, let me acquire myself a writing utensil. Show this one, right? Nope. How about this color? Okay, so here's my little whiteboard. Okay, so like if my horse is going around on a circle and its tail is going the wrong direction of the circle, can you guys kind of see that? That is a big telltale for me. So my tail should be going in the same direction as my line of travel, right? So say I'm going this way and my tail hangs this direction, which is good. But then I turn around and I'm going the other direction and the tail is going out that way, right? Then that's a real big telltale for me that my horse needs some body work. Okay. But also, even if my horse is having trouble bending, then I might go, oh, my horse's body might need a little bit of work to help with that. Because if you've been trying and you know that you can get a bend both directions on other horses, then it's probably not necessarily you, it's probably your horse that's having some trouble, right? So do you have one side of your body that maybe hurts a little bit more because you hurt yourself at some point in time?
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah, exactly. So like right now, I jumped up to get a garage door that doesn't have a it didn't have the little string wasn't pulling down. I jumped up yesterday and I'm like, oh, and my neck hurts on one side, right? Our horses get that way too. So if you're having trouble going one direction versus another direction, then I would definitely think about some body work. And like, for example, I have a horse here that I trained as a youngster, and I started him when he was 4 years old, and I rode him until he was 8. And then he sat in a pasture from the time he was 8 years old until now, and he's 21 now. And so, or until November. And he came back to me, somebody said, hey, or the owner said, we've had some family issues. We need to get rid of the horses. And I said, I'll take him. And so he came back to me and he was a nervous wreck. I was like, what happened to this horse? I rode this horse forever and all he's done is sit in a pasture. What happened? So I worked on getting in, helping his mind settle and work on that. He was super nervous about all sorts of stuff, which is not who he was way back in the day. And I was like, I think he needs some body work. And I thought he had a little bit of heaves too, because he was breathing, his breathing was hard. He was having trouble breathing. And so I had my chiropractor, who's a veterinarian, come out. And actually I have multiple chiropractors, but the particular one that I had work on him was a veterinarian. And so she worked on him and he had a rib out. And so hence he wasn't able to bend very well one direction because I was having the same trouble you were. And he was super nervous. Ever since then, he has calmed down significantly because the pain is gone, right? Or at least the initial pain. And that was, I think, 2 weeks ago. And I'm super excited about how much better he's coming along. And she said, in a month, I want to see him again. Because one and done isn't necessarily it for chiropractic work or body work. And so there's lots of different chiropractors out there. And especially if you're having trouble and it's not symmetrical going one direction or another, then I definitely would look into your horse's body and see if that is a problem. And so like this particular horse, he had lots of trouble. His hind end was a mess and he had one rib that was for sure not doing what it was supposed to be doing. And so that has changed him tremendously. And I even have now taken him off of his antihistamines because his breathing is better. Go figure, right? So I would play with that. I would inspect or think about that, and I would watch her go both directions and see if her tail hangs one directionally. Now, because you're in padded horse land, right? And
Used to be.
Used to be. That's okay. Used to be. But if you buy horses that are rejects, let's say, then if they ever got their tail cut, that can cause us problems because the tail will hang one directionally. Okay. So just
see, this filly, she was started out in a pleasure barn, so she was never on pads. But when I got her, I've had her a year, I guess, and I had her in a training barn, and then I brought her home mid last year, and I started showing like AOT. And they had her tail drop, and of course, I knew it, she would. She abscessed, and then now her tail hangs. To my knowledge, she's only had her tail drop once, but her tail wants to hang always to one side. So I really can't tell. And it goes to the right side is how her tail hangs. But there's an indentation in her tail when they had it done. And then it don't really bother me. Really, but like you were saying, noticing which way the tail goes, I really can't tell because it always falls to that side.
Yeah. So, and there's been something physical that's been done. So that's where I'm saying if there's something physical that has been done, then it's harder to tell, but you never know. You never know if it has or hasn't been done. But I would go with some body work to start off with, because if you've been playing with it for a while and you're having a real hard time, then horses don't usually do things because they don't want to. It's usually because there's something causing that trouble, right? And so just like if you have, if you have a rib out, you don't want to bend that way either, right? So so that's where you might look at it and see if there's something chiropractically. And most of the time when you do something chiropractically, you want to make sure that they're working on some muscles as well, because if they just crack the back and they don't deal with any of the fascia or the muscles that are causing that to go out of whack, they're just going to go back. So that's where you want to make sure that you have something kind of intermeshing with that, like
Mhm.
acupuncture, red light therapy, fascial release stuff, massage, there's all sorts of stuff that you can do to help that, so that it can work. But really paying attention to our horses, and their body work is really important. Of course, if their hooves are having trouble, then that's a problem as well. And that can cause all sorts of trouble. But hopefully, it's a chicken or the egg. You have to kind of go through all these pieces to figure out where your main problem lies. But finding a good person, and just because you have one chiropractor work on them does not mean that you shouldn't go find a different one. If it doesn't work, it doesn't mean that it wasn't the chiropractor, or it wasn't the fact of working on body work. It may not mean that that person was very good at it, because they are not all created equal. Like I said,
Right.
I have 4 different people that I use for different reasons,
Okay.
and I will switch back and forth dependent upon that, and dependent upon the horse. And it may be that one horse sees multiples of them, but it's not just a once and done sort of, oh, I had a chiropractor done and it's done. And like the other thing I do personally is I use red light therapy on my horses as well in between times, or I'll even do my red light therapy before the chiropractor comes. And that way I'm hoping that my muscles are relaxed and loose enough that they can adjust, and that it will stay. And then I usually red light afterwards as well to help with any soreness in those muscles. So
Okay.
I would
And
play with
then
that a little bit.
okay. And then like when I show her, the only thing that I feel like I have control when I show her bit wise is it's a little sliding gag, like maybe 4.5, 5-inch shank, and it's got a dog bone, and she doesn't fidget as much in the mouth with it. And then she is so much easier to keep her head, like her nose tucked instead of coming out. She'll stay right here, and I don't have to use a lot of pressure on her in the show pen. And this filly, she works very hard. She comes up out of her shoulders good. She stays down on her booty. She works her back end good. But I don't want to ride her in that all the time, because she's got to learn how to give to my legs, because next year she'll be 5, and then I'll have to go one hand.
Yeah. So
And
you're
I
showing her
don't
trail
know.
pleasures.
Yes, and I don't know that I can teach her to do that in that bit with that sliding gag and all, because she'll slide, even going to the left, she'll yield off my leg, but she really don't want to tip her nose in that bit. I have to still pull it.
Yeah. So one of the things that's why we try and go on that really loose rein, and being able to utilize one rein at a time. So really thinking
Right.
about slowing them around and lifting one rein, so that, and the lift is the most important. If we pull back, there's a lot of brace that happens, but if you can lift, then it helps to tip that nose a lot easier. And you're going to feel dumb doing it, because it's going to look like you're a kid, right? But you're slide that hand down, and you're going to lift up towards that horse's ear, so that you're not pulling back. You're going to cut towards that horse's ear, and that's going to help that lift. As soon as you get the tip, let it go. And then as soon as she sticks her nose out or sticks her nose the other way, slide your hand down, tip it up, so that she starts to go, oh. But it's that idea, that same idea of not wearing out the brake pads. You got to not wear out your turning, right? And being able to have that happen, where we can slide that hand down, lift that head, tip that nose, and then let it go, right? And that's where, like, for my guys, I don't want to feel like I have to control them. I want them to be able to control themselves. So a lot of times, like, if you feel like she's going to go too fast, which might happen on her occasionally, think about where, like, usually I'm going to tip the rein towards the inside of the arena, right? But if I'm having that idea of that runaway, and so that's why I put in my course, I put a video of a horse that I brought back from Tennessee, who had just, recently come off of pads, and he was a goey bugger, and I'm going to ride him on a loose rein, because ideally, ultimately for me, I want my horses to be able to go with nothing on their head at all. right?
Mhm.
And so they have to be able to manage their own emotions because I'm
Right.
not going to do it in their face. And so one of the things, like say my arena wall is on this side, I'm going to slide my hand down and lift that rein until that horse slows down and tips its nose. As soon as it slows down, then I'm going to let them go. And as soon as they speed up again, I'm going to do the same thing. And I'm going to do that for as long as it takes until my horse goes, oh, maybe I should not be running away. And if they don't slow down, then I'm going to yield their hindquarters. So I'm going to take my leg, same rein that I'm holding up, take that same leg, and I'm going to push that hindquarters out until they slow down or come to a complete stop. And then I'll let them go again. And so I let the rein go. And so what happens is they start to go, I know what happens before what happens happens. I run away. And my human slides the hand down, lifts up the rein, and turns my head towards the rail. And so the head is bent, and it's hard for them to keep running away. If they do keep running away, that's when I put that other leg on and say, move your butt over until they come to a stop, or they slow down, or they change into a good gait, like say they're pacing. And I do this. Then I let them go, and they go, oh, the human likes it when A, I slow down, B, I'm not pacing or trotting for that matter. And, so that's how I teach them to go ahead and manage this emotional nightmare that they've got going on in their brain. But I have to continuously give them that rein and know that there's a good chance that they're going to run away. And I may not give it to them completely. I may only give them a foot because I'm like, all right, well, let's see how this goes. And they take off like a shot and you're like, no, until they can manage that brain power and go, oh, this is what happens. And so I may pick up that rein like 50 times going down the long side of the arena, but I'm going to let it go every time so that they go, oh, this is the answer, because horses learn when we quit doing whatever it is that we're doing. So I pick up the rein and then I let it go and I say, that's the right answer, you slow down, or that's the right answer, you quit pacing, or that's the right answer, you quit trotting, or whatever, or that's the right answer, you tipped your nose. Those are the things, but I have to let go of the rein. The trouble is that when we head towards the show ring, we end up working on that. This is what it has to look like all the time, rather than I need these pieces and parts to work. And so it looks really dumb in the beginning. And some of you, I don't know if there's I think there's a couple of you in here that have been in my course. And that's that video of me on Jin that first couple of times was, it didn't look pretty at all. But he now I'm capable of riding him bridleless because he's like, oh, I know where I'm supposed to be and what speed I'm supposed to be at. And then I can ask him to go more and I can ask him to go less with my seat. And so my hands don't have to do it. Does that make sense a little? So I first off, check out her body, and then play with a little bit more on thinking about, can I go a little bit more on that loose rein? And can I have a little, so that your hands don't have to do so much, that she starts to manage her own emotions. Figure eights are great. But also using that rail so that you just turn her nose and you're like, yeah, go ahead, run away into the rail. That's awesome. How good is that for you? And they go, oh, don't choose a little itty bitty dressage arena to do that in, right? Choose something with a wall. And that's the whole idea. And then when they do relax down, be like, yeah, that's awesome. All I wanted you to do is just dog walk, right? And they go, oh, I had no idea that I didn't have to run into the pressure on my face. And that's basically, that's a lot of how our gaited horses are trained, is to go the idea of collection. But the problem is they're physically collecting them, not mentally collecting them. And we need to mentally collect our horses before get them emotionally and mentally collected before we physically collect them, because otherwise we're riding a time bomb, right?
Right. Yeah. And I done a versatility clinic because I'd like to do versatility with her. And she done good. She done everything I asked her to do. But I mean, she was like a bundle of nerves. Like when we went to walk over the bridge, I've never walked her over a bridge until then. We got up there. She stepped on it. She stopped in the middle of it. She stepped off. But the whole time her mouth was like, and foaming everywhere. And I mean, you could just feel her like all tensed up. But she done everything I asked. And I was like, wow, you're going to make a pretty little versatility horse. You're about to jump out of your skin every time we go through something. But
exactly. And that's where we just have to work on the emotions. And that's what natural horsemanship is all about. And so that's the whole point, is that, like in Pirelli, and there's multiple different versions of natural horsemanship, right? Pirelli is just the one that I wear the brand for. And so what happens is we use the 7 games that horses use to talk to each other. And we use those games to help our horses become more well-rounded, because each horse has something that they do really, really well. Right? So like those super calm horses, they do what we call the friendly game super well. Whereas your horse may not necessarily do the friendly game very well because she's constantly fairly nervous. So we have all the 7 games. And what happens is once they learn each of those 7 games, and we play them all, but they might do better at one or the other. Us as humans, we of course do the ones that they're good at, but that doesn't necessarily develop our horses. We have to do the ones that they're not so good at to help them become more well-rounded, more developed, right? And so that's where we go through and we play those things on the ground. And then once we get them on the ground, then we do the same games from their back. But we've got that idea happening from the ground where we're not giving them the G and haw information that's more than they can handle. Does that kind of make sense?
Yes,
so that's
ma'am.
where you might think about investing in going to like an introductory natural horsemanship clinic. Where are you at? You're in Kentucky?
Alabama.
Alabama. Okay. And there are a couple instructors there, and I actually am going to do a gaited horse clinic, I think in Tennessee, end of year. I think I might be going to the Alabama area as well. But there are some Pirelli instructors that are down there. They're not going to necessarily be able to help you with your gait, but they're going to help you with the mental and emotional status of your horse. And if you can kind of separate those ideas, one of the things that I did is I've taken them and I've put it back together. So I've taken the natural horsemanship and the gaiting and stuck it back together, because what I had to do when I learned, because I came from a very gaited background, and I knew how to get my horses to gait, but like you, I didn't understand how the brain worked. And so now I went through and I basically took all of my gaited stuff and I shoved it in a little box and stuck it in the closet and said, okay, I'm going to learn all this natural horsemanship stuff. And once I started to peel back that and got fairly good at that, I went, ooh, I can go to that closet, open up the door and pull out my gaited stuff, and I can start to mix them in together. And so that's been really useful for me, because once I get the relaxation in my horses, then that comes from mostly all of that Pirelli stuff and that natural horsemanship stuff. Then once I have relaxation, then my gait is super easy, because it's easy for me to meld the body, and my horse already knows which piece I'm talking to. So if I want more back end, I can talk to more back end. If I want more front end, I can talk to more front end and say, hey, this is the pieces and parts of my horse that I need to talk to. And they go, oh, sure. And I break it down into little pieces that they can understand. If I give them too much information all at once, then they just get nervous and upset. So they have to understand the little pieces and what those individual pieces are, so that they can become successful. Because once our horses become successful and they know what we want, they try to do it more and more for us, because they really do want to please us if we teach them that way.
Yes, and that's the way she is. She wants to be good and she wants to please and do what I ask, but she might argue a little bit, but she's eventually going to say, yes, ma'am, I'll do it. I don't want to, but I'll do it for you.
Exactly, right? Awesome. Well, hopefully that helps a little bit, and
yes,
keep in touch, and we'll see if I get to your area, or if I don't get to your area, I'm happy to come and do clinics. So
perfect.
We'll schedule some stuff to help you out with some of that brain easing.
Yes, ma'am. I would love that.
Very cool. Very cool. All right, let's see. What else do I have? Oops. In here, if I have any more that have popped in on questions. No, it does not look like I have any more on questions. Looks like I do have a hand raised somewhere. I can slide back. Oh, that's Bethany. All right. I did not lower her hand. All right. Anybody else got any questions? Looks like Wendy is waving at me, so we'll go with Wendy. I can't see all of you, so you're going to have to help me out there.
Would you ever be interested in coming to the Northwest Horse Expo in Albany? in being a clinician? I know about your not liking to talk, but
I've done a couple of expos. The trouble for me with expos is that, in case you all haven't noticed, I have tried really hard not to swear because I have a potty mouth. And so when I'm in an expo situation, I find it very stressful on myself to not swear. And so I'm trying to work on it, but it's very difficult because there's lots of little kids, and I have little kids, but my little kids are used to me swearing. Doesn't mean that I'm the best mom for that whole deal, but neither here nor there. And one of the things that I found is that it doesn't necessarily help my business very much to do expos.
Okay.
So I don't necessarily do them because I've done them in the past and I try really hard not to. I much prefer just to do clinics and work that way, and my virtual course, because I get to know you guys and then I don't feel so bad about the profanity that flies out of my mouth without me realizing it.
okay, I was gonna try.
I know. I get the question a lot, and I've done more than a handful of them, and it just doesn't seem to help my business very much.
Okay.
So it's not something that for the stress level of it.
Yeah.
I start chomping at the bit. It's all crazy.
Okay. Well, thank you. When
All
are you
right.
coming to Oregon again?
I will be there next Thursday.
Oh,
But
right.
I'm coming. I have some horse shows, and then I have a clinic in Spokane sometime in there too. So yes, I think that's 2 weekends away. Is I go to Spokane and do a clinic in Spokane, but I have a horse show in Oregon and such, and so I'll be around.
Okay,
So
good.
cool. All right, then I have Danielle. It looks like. Where are you at, Danielle? What's your question?
Mute. Oh, here we go. I figured it out. I had a question. One of your other online things that you mentioned that you teach your horse to gait online on the ground. And when do you start that?
You can start it as soon as your colt is halter broke. So
Okay.
you can start it as late as you want as well. But it's never too early to start playing with that. Obviously, if you've got a baby, your time frame that you get to do it is littler, right? But it's just part of my process. Pretty much when my horses are with me, if they start to do something that I don't like, AKA pace, AKA trot, I'm going to tell them, negative Batman, that's not part of your vocabulary. I want you to get rid of that from your vocabulary. And I'm going to state it as soon as possible. I also am going to say the same thing. If your head is up in the air, that's not part of your vocabulary. I need your head to be down and not sticking up in the air like a giraffe. And so all of those things I can talk to my horse from the ground. And as part of what I teach in my gaited horse course, or if you meet me in clinics and places, those are the things that I teach, is how do you teach your horse, even at a very young age, how to put your head down and not act like a giraffe, because it's not necessary. And I even teach leg positions from the ground before I ever get on, so that my horse knows how to move away from pressure. So does that help?
Okay. Yeah. I just right now I'm dealing with a mare that she was just at a breeding farm, and she's 7 years old, never been worked with, never really halter broke. I brought her home. I've had her for a year, and she just she's so hypersensitive, and she's so sensitive to me being critical, I guess. And so I'm trying not to set her off, and I'm trying building her confidence, because she's basically sort of a little wild, but and she's coming along, but she's just so sensitive, and I didn't want to be critical with her over the gate, because our circling game, we're still working on it, and the only kind of circling game that really she can do is the close one, where I have the carrot stick on her back, and she can do a walk, but if we go any faster, then she starts ramping up, and I can't figure out how to sort of settle her down and say, hey, you're giving me way more than I want.
Perfect. Okay. No, it's all right. And so this is what happens. And so our horses, a lot of times, and it's good that you have some natural horsemanship, so you understand that. So what happens is that our horses become very emotional when they're not gaiting properly. Because what happens is
Okay.
their head goes up in the air, which head in the air, note to self, is the what that tells the brain is to be worried about all sorts of things, right? And so if there's lions and tigers and bears around, the head goes flying in the air and the eyes get wide. And so that's emotional, right? So when we bring the head, when a horse brings his head down, and when the lions and tigers and bears are gone, they bring their head down, they come off that adrenaline and they relax. Okay. So
Right.
the idea is that we want them to be in that relaxed state. So I can start to talk to them about, hey, could you do that? But a lot of times our horses don't know how to gait without having their head in the air, like elephants or like giraffes. So I have to talk to them about that. One of the ways that I can, there's lots of things that I can do, but one of the things that I can do is you obviously know how to disengage your horse, right?
Yes.
Okay, so when you're on that close circling game, right, and you ask her for a little bit more speed, so you've asked her to move forward a little bit, and she's going forward and she loses her mind, right? She's lost her
Okay.
mind. Now, what I want you to do is I want you to ask her to move her hindquarters out, but you're not going to ask her to stop moving forward. Okay, so you're not going to completely disengage her. You're going to do what we call a partial disengagement.
Oh,
And you're going
okay.
to push that hindquarters out just a little bit until she does lots of things. She A, starts to relax. She B, slows down. There's all sorts of things that you could release to, right?
Okay.
So you release to her, you could release to just her yielding her hindquarters out, number one, right? You could release to her starting to slow down. You could release to her head coming down. You could release to a lick and chew. You could release to a change of gait. All of these
Okay.
things are pieces and parts that you can release to. And that's how you teach them how to gait from the ground.
Okay. Okay.
And so it's all, we talk about that in my course as well, is how do you do that? So it's basically a partial disengagement. But the fact that she's ramping up, she's just gotten crazy and she's gotten emotional. And so that
Right.
emotion, it starts to breed upon itself, right? And so that's where you start to say, hey, don't get so worried, honey. Move your hindquarters over a little bit, because that hindquarters moving over is that disengagement, which is part of the squeeze game, which is part of the whole idea of our horses turn, face, and wait and reassess the situation. Let your brain kick in. And so move that hindquarters over a little bit, honey. And the other thing that if you work up even further in towards their midsection, is it takes the brace out of the ribs. Okay. And the brace out of the ribs helps them to bring the head down, helps them to relax. Okay.
Okay.
So
Okay. Yeah, I never thought about doing a partial disengagement because I've always disengaged, but then you start all over again. It's like we're back to square one. We're just beating our head against the same wall.
And
okay.
The cool thing is that because you're doing a short range circling game with the carrot stick on your horse's back, and some of you that are on here may not have a clue what that means, but those of you that know Pirelli or know natural horsemanship will understand. You're already probably turning with her, right? And so, so you're turning with her, and it's real easy to go ahead and just say, hey, could you move that out? So basically, it's not really circling that you're playing a driving game. And so you're just going to drive the hindquarters out, drive the rib cage out, drive the shoulder out just a little bit here and there to help her relax. And anytime that she starts to relax down, take that carrot stick away, or you place it right back up on her back where she's confident and okay with it. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yes, it does. Okay.
So and honestly, that is the key to it all, is being able to play that driving game and tell her what you want. And it's not micromanaging necessarily, but the idea is that eventually you're going to turn it into a circling game. So you're going to become further and further away from her. And then eventually you're going to stand still and let her do it around you, but you can still pick up your carrot stick and say, hey, move your hindquarters out. You started pacing. So.
Okay. Yeah, I've done Pirelli for like 20 years, and my other horses were more left brain, and this is a right brain, so it's new territory for me.
For sure,
So,
I totally get that. So,
all righty. Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
When are you coming to Northwest Indiana?
Indiana. I'm gonna be in Michigan. I'm gonna be in Michigan in October, I think. Look at my schedule.
Okay.
So I have a clinic there, and that clinic is currently full. However, we did add, basically you have to audit the clinic, and then I'm going to do about a 4-hour section on the following Monday with anybody that wasn't able to get into the clinic. so that,
Oh.
but you have to audit so that you can at least see it. So I don't have to repeat myself, and we can just run
Okay.
through the exercises with those horses that way. And so that's a little supplement that we're doing. And I think we have, I'm not sure how many slots of that are still filled up, but if that's somewhere that's close to you, that would be great. Also potentially getting a clinic together in like the middle of Minnesota. I'm not sure how close that
Okay.
is to Indiana. But that's another potential. And Indiana isn't terrible far from Tennessee, I don't think, right?
No, nice
I'll be-
drive.
Nice drive. Nice drive. Like I said, I think I'm doing a clinic in starts with a J. Carol Carpenter's old place, if you know where that is.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I
Mackenzie
was
Courtney.
sorry when she retired.
I know, right? But sometimes you
Yeah.
got to do that. But Mackenzie Courtney purchased her place, and we are currently talking about dates for me coming and doing a gated clinic there.
Awesome.
So that I want to say it's something with a J in Tennessee, kind of.
Yeah, I've never been there. She always came up my way, so.
Gotcha. But like I said, I'm happy if you have gated friends. I'm happy to come do clinics. So we just got to get it on the schedule and figure out when works. So
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jenny. I appreciate it.
you're welcome. Awesome. Okay, let's see here. What do I have? I had a couple more pop up. Let me go back here. Okay. You guys are awesome. All right, let's see here. So this is Lori. I have no experience with gated horses, but just started WACMO riding. What is that? Kelly, if you're there, where'd you go?
Hi there.
Okay, I don't know
So
what.
Whack-A-Mole writing is it's CMO writing. It's kind of like treasure hunting with
Oh.
endurance writing.
Okay,
I
I'm
do
like
it
whack-a-mole.
too.
I
It's
don't know what
awesome.
whack-a-mole riding is. Okay, and I have next issues. So I've started my search. I'm afraid of hawk issues, though. What should I watch out for or avoid a horse that has them? Okay, say that to me in non-typing English. What are you looking for?
So I've just kind of recently been searching for or looking at horses. I'm used to your, quarter horses, mutt horses, that kind of thing. And I've joined several gated horse groups, and I see a lot of them that have like locking hocks or arthritis in the hocks, that kind of thing. And since I don't experience with them, I want to know if there's something that I can kind of particularly watch for to avoid those issues down the road, as far as if it's like a conformation thing or a breeding, that kind of thing.
I would say probably that's a biomechanical malfunction of somebody riding them poorly. Because I personally I don't like to use the word never, but I've never had a horse with hock issues in a walking horse. Or in any of the gated horses that I have personally owned or played with. And the reason for that, I think, is because of how I ride them. And I think about biomechanics, and is my horse going biomechanically sound? So what I would look for is making sure that whatever horse that you're looking at, that they are not inverted, they're not hollow, their head isn't looking like a giraffe, which is going to be super hard to find. I'm going to just let you know that now. So we want them to look like a rainbow, mostly, not with their head in the air, looking like a smile. Okay. That's not how we want our horses to look. We need them to be able to engage their back and use their body properly, and use their hindquarters well. But honestly, I don't have trouble with horses with hock issues. I've never had it happen, but I don't ride them like most people ride them. So that's what I would look for. And I don't honestly know very many people that have had hock issues with their gated horses. I'm not sure what breed they were that you were noticing that, but probably, well, I'm not even going to make an assumption on that one. Could be all sorts of things. So basically, that's what I would think about.
I've been mainly looking at the foxtrotters and Tennessee walkers.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
So the biggest thing is that they need to not have their head in the air.
And then it's funny that you say that. Yeah, well, and it's funny that you say that too, because I like a nice rounded horse as far as, I don't like the high head, and that's kind of why I've always avoided the walkers and the gaited horses, is because the ones that I've seen are kind of crazy, always head up in the air, just, kind of mindless. And I talked to a gal, told her, I explained to her, I was like, yeah, that's kind of why I've stayed away from them. And she's like, well, they have to have their head up in the air like that to free up their shoulders so that they can gait. So I was like, well, geez, if that's the case, then I don't want a walking horse or a gaited horse.
No,
So I'm
they
glad
do
to
not.
hear you say that.
They do not have to have that. So here's the deal, is that we need our horses. The way I think about it is that my horse has to learn how to go long and low. So have its head be down and long first. And then what happens is that, so I want them to look like that rainbow idea, right? And then what I do is I teach their butt to go down so that their head comes up. But I don't just crank the head up, okay? Because then I end up with this hollow back and I don't have good, healthy biomechanics. And so they can go on a loose rein. They can go with a round back, and their head can be up, but their butt needs to be down if their head is up. Okay, so you're just taking the rainbow and you're just shifting the rainbow from one direction to the other. You're not cranking the head up. But what happens is people think that it should look like the end product first, and so they just yank the head up and try and get it up and back with a big bit on, and they drop the back, and then joints and pieces do not last when you do that to bodies. And so they last much better in a gaited horse than they do in a non-gaited horse, because of our tendency to be all elasticy in all of our joints, but it's not healthy for them. So at some point in time they will fail, or they will not necessarily go as well. Okay. And so that's where I want them to be round. And so if the trouble is trying to change the world as it is today, because people think that that's what gaited horses are supposed to look like. And so I feel like I'm a little screaming little battleship out here trying to like save the world from that craziness. I know there's others out there, but it's one of those things that's the general consensus, but it is not necessarily correct. It is a wives' tale. And as Pat likes to say, it is bovine fecal matter or bullshit. So again, my not ability to keep myself from not cussing. Sorry.
Awesome.
So yeah. So, and if
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. And you're in Washington, right?
I am.
So I travel that way a lot. Like I said, I have a clinic in Spokane next week, not next weekend, the weekend after that. But I have a good friend that does a lot of sales of horses and stuff in Oregon that has horses that might be a place for you to be able to look at, because she's on the same page that I am. And then I come across them. I have a horse that's for sale currently. Then you can message me if you want to talk about him or
for sure. Thank you so much.
So and I have them occasionally. So if anybody's looking, you never know what I might come up with. So cool. Then let's see here. Was there another one that popped in down there? Pat Mason. She says, I grew up on quarter horses, mainly cutting, been away from horses for about 30 years. We're getting back into horses, and now we are very interested in gaited horses, but also interested in barrels. Those are two different subjects. Is there any crossover where a gaited horse can/will be used for both trails and barrels? Not be competitive.
Hi, I'm Joy. That's actually my husband. I'm just on his thing.
So your name is not Pat, it's Julie, right?
No, but I'm supposed to represent well, so.
Awesome. Yeah, the trouble with quarter horses or with barrel horses is that they're typically going to be quarter horses / thoroughbred, like speed creatures, right? And cantering / galloping is a really important thing for barrel racing, right? Gaited horses are designed to go long distances at a gate, right? And there's this thing called the gatekeeper gene. And one of the things that allows our horses to gait, gives us that ability to have a lateral movement. And the deal there is that it gives us the ability to pace. Now, a pace is both legs on the same side moving at the same time. Not that we want our horses to pace unless you're a pacing racehorse, right? The deal with that is that it also, because of the pacing racehorse thing, if they break into canter, then they get docked or they get disqualified or those sorts of things. And so gaited horses, because of the pace, genetically have a tendency, and this is so that you all don't freak out, typically gaited horses don't have the best ability to canter, especially if they live on the pacey end of the gait scale. If they live on the trotty end of the gait scale, they usually can canter just fine. And it doesn't mean that we can't teach these pacey horses how to canter, right? But they have to learn how to canter, okay? And what usually happens is when you ask a gaited horse to go fast and they're gaiting, so this is the deal with the racehorses, right? Pacing racehorse can pace faster than a thoroughbred can gallop. So this becomes a problem because then you pace around things. The trouble with pace is that it doesn't bend very well. As soon as you start to bend it, it turns into this thing called gait, and it turns into a disaster because they get their legs all tangled up. Okay. And so that's why they don't necessarily cross very well as far as barrel racing, because barrel racing is go really, really fast, go round a tight barrel, go really, really fast, go round a tight barrel. So it doesn't really work very good for gaited horses. Doesn't mean they can't do it, but you're never going to get a 14-second pattern. It's not going to happen, right? Or the likelihood is going to be really, really, really difficult to find that.
So Pat needs to buy me 2 horses.
So that means that you might, yeah, Pat needs 2 horses. Sounds fantastic. Mhm. Is that a bad thing? I have 10.
No, not a bad thing. I just need to make sure that I know well, actually then we need 3 horses. I need 2 and he needs 1. So it's good.
There you go. Yeah. So you need to figure out what you want for your barn, and it's okay. And you might actually need 4 because leaving one at home alone sucks. So there you go. There's your excuse to have another horse.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Never have too many. Okay. Super. All right, then let's go. Carolyn, how many participants would you need to do a clinic in Western Washington? So Carolyn, typically what I do is I like to have at least 6 participants. I can have up to 10. And then if we have more than that, we can figure out how to make that work. But that's typically what I do with that. And if you want a little more information on that, just send me an email and we can work that out and figure out when might work for you. And I like to do 2 days for the minimum amount of time. So hopefully that works. Carolyn, does that work for you? Yes? Can you unmute yourself? Let's see. I'll ask to unmute you and see if you can find the button. There. She did the thumbs up. She's like, I'm not talking. You don't want to hear my voice. Not talking in public. Awesome. Very cool. All right. I live in Western Washington too, says Lori. So you guys might have to find yourselves on Facebook or something. And we can work on acquiring you guys. So, and one of the things that you guys can do too is either on my, well, preferably on my business page, which is Jenny Trainor. Then you can, if you get all on there and turn into my friends and followers on either my personal page or my business page, then at least you guys can find each other. Or at least we can kind of locate you. So always good to click the follow and the friend thing. I do have a group that I have that says Students of Jenny Trainor. And that's a great place because I try to post things of it, and I'm going to get better about posting just miscellaneous in there. But it's a really good way to find out where I'm at, what I'm doing, and what I'm up to, or to say, hey, we need to do something here. It's a great way to kind of keep communicating. And Michelle Oliver says, are you coming close to Missouri? I don't know that I'm Missouri. That would probably, Minnesota and Tennessee is probably the closest that I am coming currently, but that doesn't mean that we can't set something up and that I can't come there. So, but if all else fails, that's what this whole virtual course is for. I have students in Poland and Germany and such and Canada from this course that have been in this course. And so it's a way for me to touch you guys from a long, long distance away. And that's always fun. And I am, we did just do the drawing. And so I'm gonna, after this call, I'm gonna go ahead and announce who won the drawing. So then, and we open up the course today, and you guys all watch your emails, as I'm going to take all your emails and put them in and send you an email, and it gives you a code for money off the course. But also just keep in touch. You never know when I'm going to be there, or if you want me to come to your area. So, oh look, Lori just sent me a friend request. Isn't that awesome? Good job, Lori. All right. Anybody else got any questions before we call her a day? I don't know. I just lowered Carolyn's hand. I'm not know if she just put it back up again or if I forgot to put it down earlier. Okay. All right. Well, it looks pretty good. Okay, well, also I'm gonna go ahead and let this download and then I'll upload it so that there's a copy of it and I'll make it public for y'all. So you can watch it again later if you want. And yeah, super good getting to talk to you guys. And until next time, talk to you all later.